If you want a longer look at this one after the video, go check out SwitchUp Extra, where Glen and I have sat chatting about it whilst playing in co-op. I'll pop a link to that down in the description. You know when you get a song stuck in your head, a real earworm? There is like a gaming equivalent of that, where you play something and it gets its hooks in and it's all you can think about. When Glen and I played Neon Inferno the other day, since then, it's really the only game that I've wanted to play myself. It's a hybrid side-scrolling run-and-gun meets gallery shooter within a cyberpunk world with some of the nicest chunky pixel art I've seen in a long time. There were aspects of it I wasn't sure about, but actually, what it does so well. So we're bringing you a full review of Neon Inferno on Nintendo Switch, which is the second outing from Xenovia Interactive, who you may know from 2021's Steel Assault, but this is very different and also pretty damn addictive. But is Neon Inferno a blazing masterpiece or just all smoke and mirrors? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. The story follows the journey of its two main protagonists, Angelo Morano, who is a skilled assassin adopted into the crime family of the Don, who's been raised from his orphanhood with a morally grey compass, both regretting the life he has to lead, but also bound by an obligation that goes beyond that morality. He's joined by Mariana Vitti, who moved from petty crime. She stole Angelo's gun and that's how they came to meet, where she was offered entry into the crime family. The world itself is one big ongoing war-torn urban jungle, with various powerful syndicates vying for control of the areas, different gangs fighting each other. There's a feeling here of different elements of classic films, touches of Escape from New York, and even The Warriors, with a lot of that done through visual storytelling within the stages themselves. Between levels, the Don will give you various assignments, and those can be chosen in the order you want. You will eventually have to make your way through these, but while it gives the early impression that there are branching paths in the narrative, that's not actually how it works. It's more a choice of the order in which you undertake things. The same can also be said, depending on which character you choose, you won't have unique environments or story elements. Instead, they opt for slightly different dialogue snippets, unique voice dialogue lines, but not that narrative path. Gameplay-wise, thankfully this is the most interesting aspect of Neon Inferno, and it's also potentially where it makes a few important missteps. Neon Inferno operates on dual planes. The foreground and background are interacted with in different ways. For example, you can shoot left or right, you can crouch and shoot, and you can also use environmental objects as cover before they're destroyed. Now, if someone's attacking you from the background or a high location, this is where you can switch to gallery shooter mode. By holding down a button, it enables a cursor on the screen, and all of a sudden, it's more wild guns than Contra or Metal Slug, but the fact it's doing these things simultaneously is by far what I found most interesting and also most challenging to get used to. For example, your brain is focusing very heavily on those foreground interactions with enemies, dodging bullets, hiding when necessary, and my goodness, this is not an easy experience, although there are difficulty modes. By default, you really have to be on your toes. But then all of a sudden, you'll see an attack from the very back of the stage, and your brain automatically goes to point the controller in that direction to shoot when you realize that no, this is where you have to use that gallery mode shooting ability. Now, Glen mentioned very early that he thought some form of gyro in these instances would actually be beneficial. The reason for that, and I agree, it would allow you to almost concentrate on one set of controls. Your brain would know that as soon as you were moving the controller for the gyro for shooting in the background, it was a distinctly different thing than when you're shooting in the foreground. Now, we did both gradually get used to the system, and once you're used to it, it works very well. But I certainly agree that that control method may have heightened the experience and made the adaptation a little easier. Plus, for target acquisition, it just would have been a snappier way of doing things. And while the system they have in place here does take a while to learn, you can certainly do exactly that. Now, as you progress through the levels, the intensity goes up massively, as does the difficulty. At the end of each area, you'll face a boss. Progression isn't as brutal as it would have been back in the arcade days, as while you may fall at a boss, you're usually only spawned very close to them. As well as this, if you're playing in co-op like Glen and I did, if one of you falls, they're not coming back until the other one either dies or is victorious. Now, combat has one more trick up its sleeve. Other than the cover mechanics, you can also deflect any green attacks back to their source. You do that by using the melee attack button, and there are also certain enemies that are very melee focused and will be able to deflect your bullets, and that's where tactically using melee can be more effective. As you'd hope, stages aren't simply the same repeat formula over and over. There are also vehicle sections, seeing you riding motorbikes, and having to lane shift yourself, and of course trying not to murder all of the civilians. Yeah, about that. As well as still thinking about the fore and background combat, there were definitely times where things felt a bit overwhelming, but personally I felt it always felt fair. I really don't mind a game being very difficult as long as I've got all of the tools I need to overcome and they don't feel overly clunky. And I did arrive to that point with Neon Inferno after that learning curve. Between your stages, you can purchase various upgrades using the in-game currency before choosing exactly where you want to go next. I really enjoy how the bosses use various aspects of these new systems. So you have that constant, interesting flow between the foreground and background combat while still maintaining the same precision dodging mechanics for the foreground. And yes, there is a roll mechanic if you want to use it, although I didn't find it entirely necessary half the time. Some stages introduce platforming mechanics, and you can go from a very tough fight to some platforming to a mixture of both, making things potentially very busy. If you're someone that finds it difficult to keep track, the manic nature of Neon Inferno may be something to consider. Personally, as I've said, the gameplay has been a real joy for me, as well as the main story campaign, which isn't the longest. It takes about 2 to 4 hours. You've also got an arcade 1 credit mode. I'm sure you can work out what that does. The local co-op, which we've played through. It's a really good game. Gameplay-wise then, I give it 18 out of 20. The controls, they're good. I think they could be further refined with some of the enhancements we've spoken about. They score 15 out of 20. One of the first things you'll notice with Neon Inferno is that lovely 32-bit pixel art style, chunky pixels, but also its CRT style filter that overlays the whole experience, which sometimes can feel a little too heavy-handed or forced. Here it really does fit with that aesthetic. If for whatever reason you don't like it the way it is, there is some tweakability there to change the strength of that effect. Color-wise, the whole thing is so vibrant. There's a crunchiness to the gunplay, and the constant explosions going off and changes in environmental scenery. It's interesting that it still manages to feel very much like a new game. The pixel art animations for the characters is very strong as well. It's just got a very good sense of itself and style, and the same can be said for that soundtrack. There was even one moment where it switched to a very well-known classical song and it just worked perfectly. Now this is a Switch 1 release, so we must talk about Switch 1 performance first. It does struggle more on Switch 1 in certain areas. There are about 3 locations where performance will drop down a little and it seems to stutter. Generally, performance feels okay, if not 60 frames per second when playing on Switch, but it's still very responsive. I didn't notice any real input latency. While it does target 60 frames per second, those drops you will see them. If you're playing on Switch 2, it's a flawless 60 all the time. Readability can be a slight issue in certain scenes where its hectic nature can mean locating where your player is a little more tricky. Overall, it's very strong. Now, had I scored this based on the Switch 2, it would be about 19 out of 20. With those couple of drops and the need for a little patch, I dropped that down to 18 out of 20. Sound and audio, though, that scores 19 out of 20. At the moment, she has a 20% discount that leads all the way up to December the 3rd, but its RRP is £16.75 for what you could complete in around 2 to 4 hours, so it's not a long experience. But there is that extra content and those extra modes to keep you coming back. Still, I think for some, that's just going to be a little too short, but for the genre, not so much. I personally think it's a good game and one that I would recommend picking up, and I'd give value 16 out of 20. Neon Inferno has been a real surprise. I really enjoy the hybrid nature of the gameplay, the challenge that it offers, but also how fair it is in terms of checkpoints. It's not going to suit everyone, but if you're a fan of some of the arcade classics, the 90s run and guns, and the idea of a Contra and Wild Guns baby appeals to you, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. It gets a SwitchUp score of 86%. Thank you to all of you that enjoyed the content. As I said at the start, we have a full, longer, extended video of this one over on SwitchUp Extra if you want to go check that out. But yeah, easy recommendation, especially with that 20% discount at the moment. Thank you to our Patreons and members, all of you that enjoy the content. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!